Should we get going? Let's do it.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So yeah, thanks for joining, guys. I really appreciate it. So this is a GTM working session, and we're specifically going to focus on the subject area of founders and sales leaders. Before we get into it, and I'll keep checking the waiting room. For those that don't know, obviously introduce Closing and Foundry and the team, and then we'll obviously get into it. We've got 45 minutes. We can certainly go over by a few minutes if we need to. It might just be half an hour, who knows? But it is a working session. It looks like most cameras are on, which is good. If yours is off and you can turn it on, that's great. Here's Miles. But yeah, if you're in a compromising position, don't. But yeah, keep entering people. There we go. But yeah, so working session. So if you've got any questions, put them into the chat, pipe up, raise your hand, whatever you need to do to interrupt whoever's speaking. We are recording, but we're only recording to capture the insights. So we're not going to share names, not going to share any, company information. We are only doing it so we can consolidate the insights and send them over to you. So you don't need to write notes. You don't need to take screenshots of any slides unless you want to. We'll pop it all over. If we can all, I suppose, adhere to Chatham House rules, so nothing goes on outside of obviously this call. If we do start kind of solving problems, we potentially need to get into some specificity. So yeah, Chatham House rules, if that's all right. Goal of the session. So the goal of the session is to give you, I suppose, some practical advice from the guys that we've got on the call in terms of what we've seen work and what doesn't work into the subject area. We generally get questions about this area a lot, which is, I suppose, why we're doing this dedicated session. We've had some fantastic questions, which we will try to get to and kind of tackle first as we go through. We won't get to all of them. Now, at the end of the session, if you wanted to, we're offering a 30-minute consultation with any of the partners that you can see on the call, and just to go through your specific situation. As you'll see as we go through, there is no silver bullet to this. There's no one answer. The answer is based on your specific needs, what skills you've got, what skills you haven't got, what skills you need into a sales from a salesperson, your cash position, all the different things. Okay. So I think James, you can put that into the chat now if you want to, and then we'll put it in at the end. So on the call, introductions, we've got Douglas, and Douglas is absolutely a GTM turnaround expert. I think I'm right in saying that you started in value engineering,
Right.
and has led teams at Oracle, a massive company, Okta, selling the big deals, the mid-sized deals, also the small deals, but has also worked in startups and scale-ups, so the whole panacea, if you like, for want of a better phrase. We've got Laurie Mascot, which is kind of over there. Similarly, led startups where there's literally zero, so no revenue coming in, and all the way through to the scale-up phase. And I think you're peaking at about 50 million ARR or something
Yeah.
extraordinary. But also has worked in Siebel and Oracle. So again, it's got the full gamut. And then we've got Andy, who is again a GTM turnaround expert, but also a fintech expert. He spent 15 years in Deutsche Bank. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah, latterly leading kind of GTM functions at a major scale up. And then finally, last but by no means least, we've got James, who's a founder, not a seller, but learned to sell into banks. It's letting someone else in, which is obviously no mean feat. They're slow, they're risk averse, etc., etc. But also set up pioneered open banking protocol in the UK. So that there should be enough kind of wisdom. We should have hired enough, managed enough, and fired enough to give you some perspectives. So yeah. Okay, a little bit about us. So we help startups and scale-ups with GTM and B2B sales execution. And typically we get involved where there's a gap between actual forecasts and targets. It's a GTM strategy that isn't fit for purpose, or it's B2B sales execution, which isn't where it needs to be. So we fix this with a design phase whereby we'll show you what to fix in 5 days and how to do it in 90. Enablement phase where we create, train on the playbook and the new GTM and give you process, qualification, method, message, measurement against that new revised GTM, and then run where we operate the system with you, do the coaching, the leadership, I suppose those cadences to make sure that that new kind of rhythm sticks and you start to see the repeatability and that gap close between target, forecast, and actual. Okay, so that's what we do. I suppose with that, I'll hand over to Douglas and go through really kind of why we're here today, and then we'll definitely get into it.
Great. Thanks, Charles. Welcome, everyone. I just want to reiterate that sort of as a little Christmas treat, and the fact that we're not going to be able to get to all your questions today. Click the link in the chat and you can get a no obligation 30-minute, really just an open conversation. Tell us what some of your challenges are, if you needed advice on anything, and we'll be happy to oblige. So founder-led selling. This is something that Charles, can you mute
Mm,
this part there? Great.
we're good.
Okay. So founder-led selling is something that's come up over the past year a lot, and we've been working with a lot of founders in this space, and that's why we opened up this topic this month. And it's interesting. That's, I think, why we got such a large quantity of interesting questions around it. But if we go through it, founders typically are the first salespeople. And, even when they're not natural born salespeople or comfortable selling, so to speak, they're usually excellent at it, right? And why are you excellent at it? Because you're passionate about the space, the product. You can tell the story of how you're solving a problem, how you discovered the problem, the journey you've been on. And also, you probably have some network in the space. Many founders started as practitioners of a given function, and then they saw a gap or a problem, and they teamed up with technical people, or they are technical people, and they found a solution for it. And they know other people in that same functional space, and they can call them and say, "Hey, I've solved that big problem we've all had for the last 10 years." And your initial sales come from that, or again, just from your passion and your ability to talk about the journey. And don't ever forget, it's a huge strategic advantage that your prospects and customers can meet the founder of the company they're talking to. They're not going to be able to do that with large software companies or large businesses in general, right? So then you transition to the next step, which is, okay, I can't scale. I've got some funding, or maybe I'm bootstrapped, but now I've got more prospects, or my sales machine is slowing down. I need to hire a sales function. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but you have kind of two choices. There's maybe three choices, but the first is you hire some salespeople, and you manage them. And that is really powerful. And we're going to get to why that is. The other option is you hire a sales leader. Now, we don't really recommend this at this stage, and we're going to talk more about that, but that can be a very costly mistake. So, as you transition to a pseudo sales leader, and some of you will be amazing sales leaders, right? Some of the best CEOs came up through the sales side, but the vast majority probably not so much. It's really not your area, your natural area of expertise. Your natural area of expertise is developing new solutions to problems, and developing them and running the team and running the business and all that kind of thing. So you still need to do it. And that's an area that we can really help. And we know some of the pitfalls, um, as being a first time sales leader and a founder at the same time. Okay. I think that sets the scene.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, I think so today's focus is around the middle, just letting someone else in. So that transition. So this is where all probably the questions are coming from. So yeah, we'll get into it. So first we're going to do a quick poll, and then we're just going to get into the subject area. So drop into the chat. We're not going to do anything, any flashy polls. But three options, one question. How many of you have hired a salesperson or a sales leader, whatever, hired a dedicated seller, um, And option one is, yeah, hide one, but it didn't work out. Option two is, yeah, hide one and it worked out. Option three is never hired one. Just get a sense of that for a minute.
A lot of threes.
It's good.
Okay.
Yeah, good mixture, actually.
Okay. So let's get into it then. So I think thank you for doing that. I think Laurie, maybe you want to kick it off. And guys, please feel free to chime in. If you've got questions on this area, hiring and onboarding, please chime in. But yeah, I think you've got a perspective on hiring, but I suppose more specifically firing. To
Probably both. It was interesting. There's a report that I follow, and I've been doing it for a number of years, and it's actually the average tenure in our industry for a head of sales, a VP of sales, a CRO. And for a long time, it was about 18 months, which is actually quite short. Funnily enough, recently it's now dropped to below 14 months. And if you put that in the context of a startup or a scale up, you might have gone out and done some seed funding, you might have got a Series A, but you might have raised let's say £1 million. So if you then apply the lens of the average tenure being 14 months and significantly less, this is potentially a 200 to 400K out of your funding mistake. So this is something that we want to avoid. And I think there are a number of options as to when you bring in and the type of sales leader that you bring in, and how you transition away from that founder-led sales to actually building out and scaling a sales team. So if I think of some of the models that I've personally been involved with and done, it can be let's go and hire that heavy hitter who's going to, build out the sales team and recruit salespeople for me and all those sorts of things. And actually, I've seen a number of those fail, and one of the reasons is actually making that transition and the type of person that you're bringing in. So, for example, I've done some work with one company, and they hired someone straight away, and that was they announced themselves as a closer, but they didn't know the industry, they didn't know the market, and magically they're going to come in and close deals. Well, funnily enough, it didn't actually happen. So ended up being a very costly mistake. So the options I think open to us are, yes, go and get one of those big hitters, but I think you need to be particularly careful about the type of person that you get. So startups and scale-ups are very different. The sales approach is very different. The sort of motion is very different. I've worked at some of the larger companies. I've been at Oracle, I've been at Siebel, and actually a lot of people there is no way I would bring into a startup. Selling in startups and scale ups is hard. You haven't got the brand. A lot of those people that I see, a lot of salespeople and managers I see in those big organizations are fantastic at actually facilitating an ordering process. So if you work at Oracle, for example, someone's going to ring you up, they're going to have a budget, they're going to have a project, and then they're probably going to do a beauty parade with you and maybe Infor and maybe SAP, and someone's going to get the deal. In startup world, actually, I think it's a very different approach. You haven't got a brand, nobody knows you. You've got to go to them. You've got to build the sales cycle. The chances are you've got to help them find budget, which will either be get new budget or get that budget from elsewhere. And it's I often refer to something called the journey sell. We are building a journey, particularly if we're at, just past MVP. It's a completely different sales process. And, I've actually made that mistake in startups and scale-ups. I've brought on some people with great experience, relevant experience from a big company. They're used to selling with the brand. They can sell on brand. They can sell on product. You put them in this environment and they fail miserably. So it's
Can it work, Laurie? So like, is there someone senior that you can bring in?
yeah, and I think actually what you're looking for is it's probably more behavioral. Why do founder-led sales work? They work, as Douglas was saying, because you have the vision, you have the passion, you have the knowledge. You can talk about the journey, you can talk about the input with verve and with passion. We need to instill that into the people that we bring in. Actually, Charles, I'm going to go slightly off piste here.
Um,
We have another little poll, and it's something that I ask many, many founders when I work with them or when I've been employed by them. And it's A, how do you regard salespeople? Is it A, they are a necessary evil, or is it B, they're actually a valuable part of the business and absolutely crucial to how we scale? And for me,
Should we take the poll though?
let's do the poll.
Do
Do
the
the poll.
poll. Drop it into the chat.
Poll.
Necessary
Do the
evil.
poll. Come
Necessary
on.
evil.
Go for the poll.
Yeah.
So
B.
A
Yeah, A,
is,
necessary evil.
are they a necessary evil? B, are they a valuable part of the business and necessary to scale?
Laurie, has
It
anybody
depends.
answered A when
Yeah,
you've
but
spoken to them?
Loads of times you would be, no, actually, you probably wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of times, yeah, do you know what? I've got to do it. I know I've got to do it. I hate salespeople. They're going to come in here and do God knows what. And immediately you're just sort of thinking, okay, this isn't going to work. Yeah, from the sort of sales leadership or the salesperson perspective.
Yeah.
So it's kind of bridging that gap because actually, what do we want to do? We want to transfer the knowledge, the passion, the vision that you have into those salespeople, and that's important for a whole range of reasons. Not least of all, culture of the organization. Last thing you want to see is someone like me coming in and building their own little silo in your business.
So you were saying behaviorally, you could get a senior person, but you need to check.
You need someone that's going to be willing to roll their sleeves up. So there are different models. You don't have to just go and get a Laurie or a Douglas or a Charles or a James.
Yeah.
There are different things that you can do. And the next one down is actually something that I've done and I quite like. But I thought I did some work with one company for about 4 years actually, and it was a consulting company who had written a fantastically cool product, but couldn't even spell ARR at the time. And we started taking it to market. And I spoke to the CEO and said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And he said, "Actually, what I'd like you to do, I'm not a salesperson," he said. I need to scale the business, but I'm really concerned about it. What I'd like you to do is come in. We need to go and sell some stuff. So, Laurie, can you actually sell some stuff? And I will, give you the knowledge, give you the skills, transfer the vision and the passion, which was great because then I was able to go and talk to customers about it. And at the same time, he decided he wanted me to sell and then build a team around me so we could start scaling that business. But it was a team that, had that vision, had that passion, had all the knowledge they needed about the industry. So that's another alternative. But that's really hard because a lot of people in sales leadership positions do not want to go backwards to doing that, and often actually can't. And we'll talk a little bit about behaviors in a moment. I think Douglas has got some interesting things to say on that. So that's another model. You can get a sort of more senior person who's willing to roll up his sleeves, go and sell some stuff, and let's start building a sales team, and then let's start putting the processes in place. Another alternative is don't get a sales leader, manage them yourself, get some salespeople on board. And let's see what works, and we can try some stuff, and we can do some different things.
So you get like the eager AE, right? So it's the
And,
one,
and
the
then, yeah,
second
then you
best job.
kind of got the eager AE who you actually think he might not have done it before. You like him as a salesperson, you think he's good, and he has the capability to grow with the organization. So there are a number of models there, but actually for me, a lot of this is just getting the right people on board. And the issue is, how do you test for that? And I think I'm going to bring in Douglas here, who's got some interesting things about certainly rubrics, how you measure for the things that we need in a startup scale up.
Thanks, Laurie. So there's a couple of things here. One, you know, I met a founder at an event a few weeks ago, and after we did a master class, and afterwards he came up and he said, "I'd really love to talk to you because I'm a founder. I was the number one salesperson. We grew to 2 million annual recurring revenue last year. This year, I've hired 5 salespeople. I've fired 3. The other 2 are probably going to have to go. They're failing. And my revenue's down to 1 million because I don't have the bandwidth to go out and do all the selling anymore. I'm spending 80% of my time managing these 3 salespeople. He never had more than 3 at any given time. And that's a pretty common thing. So a couple of things there. One, clearly this person hired the wrong salespeople, the wrong AEs, account executives for their business. And they are not managing them well. And it's taken him nearly a year to figure out they're failing. So how, and it's taking him a lot of his bandwidth to manage them, right? And somebody had a question before this call around, how do I get my salespeople to adhere to process? Well, you kind of have to hire for that, right? And if they don't want to adhere to your process, don't be afraid to have that conversation. But what I've done in the past very successfully is I recommend building a rubric. And some people say to me, well, what's a rubric? Is it a skills matrix? It's not really a skills matrix. It's more of a behavior matrix. And this is to Laurie's point about founder transfer. So you're a founder, you're passionate, you can go out and tell the message. You have to hire people that not only can you transfer that to, but they have to have that passion to begin with. So the best example is if you have a candidate come in for an account executive role, salesperson role, and they don't know much about your business. They don't understand your space like at all. They haven't done any research and they're not passionate about it. They're not the right people, right? So what you need to do is you need to find somebody that when you walk out of the room, you don't say, well, of the 5 or 6 people I interviewed, this woman seems like the best fit. You want to say, I'd buy from her any day. I would buy my product from this salesperson. You need to be excited about them. So how do you do that? This rubric has a number of behaviors that you want to see, and there are skills in it as well, right? And the reason this is really important is it's not only for hiring, it's also for managing. And to the point, Laurie's point about the average AE in the software as a service space currently is lasting 14 months. I think it's too long, right? Because if they're only lasting 14 months, you probably should have gotten rid of them after 2 or 3. But you kind of talked yourself into believing they're okay, and he's got a lot of promises, a pipeline, and things like this. Well, the rubric takes all that away. So rubric says, here's the 5 main things that I'm looking for. Here are the behaviors that support those things. And in the interview process, you can kind of figure out, where do you fit into these categories or not? And it's okay. No one's ever going to fit into all the categories, but then you can immediately start to have development conversations about this is what my good looks like for an account executive. And I think you fit 3 or 4 out of the 5. And I'd like,
Douglas, a question. If
yeah,
you're sitting here and you're listening to this and you go, Christ, I don't know how to do this. So I'm, maybe people on the call that they're not sales managers, sales leaders, right? Where do you start with a rubric? Because the rubric in theory is grounded in what you need and a bit about the future, right? So there's a moment in time when that rubric is valuable. 2 years down the line, you want a different rubric. So how would you start sitting in a room going, right, what do I need?
Well, and certainly we can help you with that, but you know, it's all about what you need. What does your ideal salesperson look like? And there's a lot of material online. You can do some research around that. You can engage some experts. You know, if you have investors, they'll know some people that they'll have sort of CROs at large that may be able to help you. We can help you, firms like ours. But every rubric's different. That's why, you know, when I share the rubric at various events and trainings and people say, "Oh, can you send it to me?" I say, "I'll send it to you. You can have it." But here's the thing. It's not going to be 100% fit for your purpose because what you're looking for is going to be slightly different. But the magic of it is once you get it right for the next 12 months, 24 months, not only are you going to hire better, but you're also going to be able to have the hard conversation after 2 or 3 months and said, look, you know, one of the things in the rubric is salescraft, and part of that is prospecting. I'm just giving a hypothetical. And you're not doing the prospecting that we expected. You know, you're just not, this is not, you know, how do you score yourself? Because I'll tell you how I score yourself. And you do this, you know, self-scoring beforehand, and then you say, well, you know, either we agree or we don't agree because you can't be afraid to move people on if they're not the right fit. And we've all made hiring mistakes. The other suggestion that I would give on this, once you know what you're looking for, or even if you don't know what you're looking for, so if you're just going to wing it, and that's okay. We've winged it for decades, hiring people. If you're going to hire two salespeople or four salespeople, and I always encourage people to hire at least two, four is better. Six might be too many if you're doing founder-led sales, but or founder sales management. Why two or four? Because 50% are going to fail. No matter you, if you hire the best possible people you can find, still the average is 50% are going to fail. So you want to be, you don't want to be sitting after 6, 12 months with zero salespeople if you can help it. Now, having said that, if you have the wrong salespeople, go for zero. But you need to be able to move on that. So always hire two to four. Two or four, I say, because 50% just statistically, it's not going to work. Um, so, you know, the rubric helps you have those discussions and move people on quicker than convincing yourself for 12 or 14 months that this person is really trying hard. Are they? Are they exhibiting the right things? So if you're hiring two or four people, you don't want to interview 5 or 6 people. You want to interview 30 or 40 people. You know, even if the first person you interview seems like a perfect fit, you're not experts. Get more experience. And interviewing is not for everybody. It's not, you know, not everybody loves to do interviews, but you will build up a lot of knowledge and skills and ask people, you know, how they're, you know, how they've done it in the past, not what they're going to do in the future. But one question that's very, Charles, you had a question?
If you are not a sales expert, how do you get past the fact that bad sellers can actually interview quite well?
Yeah, so you have to be really detailed. So go in deep because bad sellers usually aren't too detailed because great sellers are, is the converse to that.
Right.
But it's very, you know, ask the questions. What have you done in the past? How have you done that? Where did the lead come from? You know, and that's my number one question, right? Is, you know, tell me about a deal you're proud of. And they all wax lyrical. And if they're like, well, it's a deal, blah, 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 and it's sort of, it was in the CPG industry. Well, who's the customer? And what was the solution? What problem are you trying to solve? If you can't answer me, the deal you're most proud of, what problem you solved for your prospect that became a customer, that's a real red flag. Then get into the detail of how did you get to this customer, right? Did they create a point of view? Somebody had a question in the chat earlier, or they said they wanted to talk about enterprise selling. Enterprise selling is all about having a point of view, a hypothesis that you build tailored to your customer because every customer is a little different. And especially if you're going to be like a category creator. So, you know, Lori talked about how difficult it is selling when you're a small startup, you don't have brand recognition. How about if no one's ever even heard of the solution you're selling? It's a new category. The only way you're going to do that is get meetings based on content, and the content has to be tailored, especially in the enterprise space.
Can I
Uh,
just pause there for a sec? So I'm going to pick on you, Miles. Are you thinking of hiring Miles?
Um, Probably mid next year.
Oh, there's enterprise as well. Sorry, just to be clear on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Can
No,
I
it's
can I can I just sorry to
go
jump
on.
in? There is just on the flow that Douglas was talking about, it's really important to drill down. And there are techniques that you can use for that, particularly sort of multi-level questioning. So don't let people away with a glib answer.
Yeah.
So, for example, a question I often ask is, what makes you a better salesperson than the other five people are who's going to walk through the door? What's the secret formula? What's the secret sauce? And, you know, the people I don't like will be saying, well, you know, my customers like me, my customers trust me, and what have you. And I'm going, well, I don't know you. I have no particular feeling whether I like you or not. Tell me more about what it is you do. And you can actually drill down again. So if you're not happy with the next answer, go again. I'd always say never go more than 3 levels down because you start breaking people. But it's a very useful technique to actually get to the information. Don't let people get away with a glib answer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's right. So yeah, Miles, have you got that shape and size of, I don't have to reveal anything, but have you got in your head what you think the profile is?
Yeah, so for me, we sell into kind of two very different sides of of our network. And so very specifically, I know exactly who the person is that, that I'd like to bring into the
Okay.
team because they yeah, they kind of work in our industry. I talk to them every other week. Know them quite well. So
Yeah.
it's not quite the same process perhaps that Douglas and Laura have been talking about.
Okay.
It's a good, but you bring up a good point, Miles. So that's another way that you can create your rubric is, let's say Miles in 18 months time, you're going to be hiring 4 people or 6 people. And you have this one seller that you've known, you've hired him, he's been there for 6 months, he's delivered everything that you wanted and more. Look at the skills and behaviors that particular person has and translate that into a map called a rubric that will help you to find more people like them. But I cannot stress enough having mediocre or poor salespeople is not the next best thing to having great salespeople. It's hugely counterproductive. Go the extra mile, get the great people.
Right, let's move on. I presume everybody can see the screen. I won't go through it, but here's some, good practice when you are looking to when you're looking to hire. Okay, so let's move on to managing and measuring, and maybe firing. That might be a good subject as well. But yeah, who wants to have a go on this? Maybe Douglas, or did you want to?
Well, I've been doing a lot of talking. Let's let Lori start this one, and I'll chime in if and when.
Okay. How do
Yeah.
you manage, Laurie? Any key principles?
Yeah, I do think as an industry we sometimes have a habit of overcomplicating things. So my first sellers that I bring on board, it's really simple. There are only 3 things as a salesperson you need to do. You need to build pipeline, you need to advance pipeline, and you need to close pipeline. If there's no pipeline, 100% of your time is going on building it. We can measure that. Once we've built pipeline and we've started to engage in this strange thing called a sales cycle, we can then look at how those are advancing. And if there's a problem, if there's blockages, and we can measure that. And then obviously we can measure close and forecast against close and all of those things. But the key premise for measurement for me is those 3 things. You're either building pipeline, advancing pipeline, or closing pipeline. Anything else that isn't relevant to those 3 things, and I'm not excluding things like, getting that passion, getting that knowledge, because that's going to help me do all of those things.
Yeah.
But salespeople are really good if things aren't working out, finding other things to do. We need to keep them focused on those 3 things: build, advance, close. And all
Yeah.
of those we can build processes and KPIs around.
So that gamut is kind of what you define as revenue generating activities. And what would be what's the major distraction? Let's say if you're managing, he's not 100% fixed on revenue generating activities. Have you seen guys that are distracted or?
Oh, all the time. Give salespeople a chance to go off in a different direction, they will do. So yeah, it's hugely important, and you can do this at interview stage as well. These are the three things I care about. These are them. This is how we are going to measure your success. And the reality is, you might only be doing one of those things because, like I say, early days, you're purely focused on building pipeline.
And you
Great.
ramp as well, following that logic, right? Because obviously you build pipeline, then you get pipeline, then you start to advance it. So the ramping can be done in line with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
How
100%.
about you, Douglas? How would you manage?
May I just ask a
Sorry,
question?
Jeremy has a.
Yeah.
Yeah, just it's specifically on that, so it might chime in. We've got three salespeople, two of which are candidates for management of the team. None of
Yep.
they're all reporting directly to me as founder-led salesperson at the moment. One just wants to build process, and she says, and she's great, and she's probably the top performer. And she says, "But I need process. We haven't got enough process here." And she's always wanted to go off and do that distraction. And yet none of them have yet proven that they can really do those three stages. So that's really resonating with the 1, 2, 3. I'm like, will you please just focus on that?
Yeah,
The trouble is they say this is the route to getting that. I need to do these other things too. And I'm sort of thinking, I'm not sure you do because we do have enough process. I want you to do 1, 2, 3. So how do you balance and hold them in that
I,
cycle when they're, because it's a sensible thing she's saying.
yeah, but it sounds like a bit of a distraction to me. And all, yeah, I sort of go for when it comes to startups are chaotic, so you need people that can actually deal with that chaos. Because the reality is, you start off in chaos. If you're really lucky, you kind of get to managed chaos, but there's still a bit of chaos there. And then obviously you start building in those processes and what have you. But for me, it's kind of the three bears approach to process: not too much, not too little, just enough. And if all someone's worried about is process, you know what? I'd be having conversations around, yeah, forget that for the moment. I only need you to do one thing: build pipeline. Or if you've built that pipeline, I now need to see it advancing. So yeah, I think it's a focus thing that you just need to keep coming back to. This is what I want you to do, and this is how I'm going to measure it. Everything else becomes a distraction, and salespeople are great at distracting you. Trust me, I've done it for a long time.
How about you, Douglas?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more nuance to this. I'm intrigued with what you said around, she says you need to have process because she's kind of right. And I think you feel that, Jeremy, right? So there, especially when it comes to lead generation, you can do it two ways, right? You can do the scattergun approach, which is just, I'm going to pick up the phone and call everybody I can possibly think of, and tell them that I can solve their problem. Or you can do it a little more systematically. And it depends on what you're selling, and it depends on the price point, the buying cycle, if it's a known problem in the industry, et cetera, et cetera. So without going into this a little bit deeper, she may have a point that you do need a process. And it also intrigued by you say, well, she's probably the strongest of my three. And maybe that's because she needs process to do it. The other option to take the distraction away is to engage a small firm to create the process, and give her 2 hours with the firm to help create the process, and then it's done, and you go run then you just execute on the process, and that's going to build pipeline, move pipeline, and close deals. So I think there is some process that's required. But to Lori's point, if it's a person that needs a lot of process to be comfortable selling or to be effective selling, it's a little bit of a red flag in a startup environment.
When we have plenty of process, it's not the lack of process, it's the lack of wanting to follow the process we've got.
Oh, I see. Well, that's a whole different thing. Then, is the process working?
Not as fast as we'd like, but yes. I mean, it's a fascinating.
That's it's never as fast as you like.
Yeah. I would argue, yes, it is. And it's 5 million turnover. We've got 500 customers, so it definitely works at some level because we've got those customers, right? So, but we would like it to be growing faster than it is, for sure.
It's probably not a problem. I mean, if you're growing and the process is working and you're closing deals, better process rarely drives significant growth.
That's my point. Yeah.
I think you're right on, Jeremy.
And any iteration of that process is probably an hour or two a week, not the top priority, right? It's about having priorities. In the same way that a lot of, I think salespeople, in my experience, you get ones that want to know everything. They want to become domain experts, right? So they use that as an excuse to go, well, I need to understand every part of, I don't know, the net zero transition and all the regulations across the world and so forth in order to be able to sell. And the reality is it's not truth. You
Yeah.
just need to know enough to get the next meeting, to open up the conversation, to progress
Yeah.
the deal. You don't have
Maybe
to become a domain expert.
100%. And maybe that's so Vicky's asked a really good question. So I'm interested in whether the product isn't there yet. Is that an excuse? Okay. An indicator of the wrong hire or the wrong managing approach. So yeah, if the product's not there yet, what should the seller be doing?
Been there, and A, it's an excuse I've heard so many times across so many salespeople, it's untrue. However, there can be truth in it. In which case, I sort of go back to my point about the type of person that you're looking for. So you're looking, okay, this feature doesn't work. Well, okay, is this a killer? We'll get it working in the future, or we're missing this piece of functionality. Well, then you're kind of into a different sales cycle. You're into what I call the journey sell, which is Mr. Customer, we are looking, we believe we can add significant value to whatever it is that you're doing. However, this is not the end point. This is the start point. We would like, a mutually beneficial relationship. We'd like you to come along the journey with us. It's a different kind of sell, and probably not one that you have to do, for example, normally in big companies. But so A, it's a different kind of sell. B, the people you're selling to is you're probably looking for someone that, your ICP might well be not going to go with the norm. They might want to stand out from the crowd. So it's about building a case to help them do that. But it's very much the journey sell, which is different to this is your requirement and this is how we meet it. This is now actually we're into a sales cycle of where we're changing the requirement, we're changing the goalpost, we're actually maybe changing what you're looking for because you're not sure about the art of the possible. So it's a very different kind of sell as well.
And
Brilliant.
Laurie, do you think there's a qualification step in there as well? Because I've seen the
Yeah.
excuse a lot over the years, and sometimes that feature that isn't quite working, that could be a little bit better, is not a blocker, or could be there next month, or if we get the deal, we'll promise to have it in 3 months. There's easy ways to work around
There
those
are, and
blockers.
it's something I've heard, and it could be valid, but I've heard it many more times probably as an excuse rather than a valid reason.
And I think, again, just from my perspective, I think great question, Vicky, but these
Yeah.
are warning signs that the right people aren't there. And so, the adage of hire slow and fire quick really comes into it because as Laurie and Douglas are illustrating here, it's attitude and behaviors that are the most important thing, right? So
But
Particularly in startups and scale ups, yeah.
yeah, but there's also an opportunity. I mean, if this particular person has a lot of the right traits, but this is just, obviously this is a major thing, right? But if you owe it to both yourselves to try and break her out of this and explain how you would approach it. And then she either takes the advice or she doesn't. And if she doesn't, then you got to move fast because there's just no point.
We're at time. I think we can probably
there's a
go
couple
on.
other
But if you want to
questions.
drop off, feel free to drop off. So yeah, sorry, James,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
question?
no, there's a couple other questions. There's two here, one from Miles, which might have covered a little bit already, but we can recover it. What can you do to attract great salespeople into a startup?
No, we haven't covered that. That's a real big issue. Having run sales at startups from 0 to 1 and sort of first in a country, that's the number one problem. I don't know that there's a great answer for that other than interview a lot of people and you'll find the person that gets the problem you're trying to solve and wants to be part of the journey. And it it is about attracting them, but it's about filtering out the ones that are not, I think is the most important thing. And that's hard.
And I think there's that passion, isn't it? Really, it's how do you link that passion in from a founder, which are really good at sort of product level sales, where you're talking about features, you're talking about, how do you instill some of that passion and sense of excitement into the salesperson while still, I guess, giving them the means of success, the bit of process they need, the metrics they need, the frameworks that they need to deliver the results. Because
Yeah, but
most
I mean
most
that's
salespeople want to hit targets, right? If you don't want to hit targets again, it's probably not the right role for you.
I mean that's all true, but you got to get them in the door to talk to you first. Once
Mm.
you talk that, I don't know anybody that can, any good founder can get a salesperson absolutely signed up. That's easy because they have the passion. They have, they can t talk about the journey. It's getting him in the door to have that conversation. I think is the big challenge, and there's no real easy answer to that, by the way. Because salespeople, you just said it, salespeople want to make money. So the first thing they say is, "How many salespeople are here?" None. Okay, that's a little bit of a worry for most salespeople. Okay, well we have two. Okay, you have two. Are they making their number? No, that's why we're talking. Okay, how much did the number one salesperson make last year? Well, we're still starting, but that's okay. You have to be honest because you don't want somebody that expects to come in, it's going to be an easy ride, and they're going to make lots of money because it's going to be hard work, and they're not going to probably make lots of money in year one, but they might in year two, three, and certainly in 5 or 10 when there's an exit, etc.
Excellent. And another one for you, Douglas, just around the rubric and stuff. There is a question quickly here on um, how do you keep it maintained? So someone, Joe Greedon principle, how do you manage the expectations and the rubric and so forth in a startup, considering the rate of change, the chaos that's
Well, I think if you're still in the real chaos phase, right? If you're still in the storming phase, I would say you just keep it at high enough level that it's always going to be the same, right? And if you take and you there's rubrics published around the internet and things you can get, and they're a little bit generic, but that's probably good in a storming environment because at least it gives you the fundamental building blocks to move off of. Once you get into the norming phase and things start to calm down a little bit, you can fine tune it more. But it's down to either the founder as sales leader or the sales leader, or maybe even the operations leader if you have one to kind of work with that or HR. A lot of startups get HR maybe sooner than they should. It'll give them something to do. But I don't think that the type of salesperson you're looking for and the behaviors are going to change a lot. Um, but it's all down to I hired five sales people. One succeeded incredibly well. The other four were terrible. Okay, the one that succeeded incredibly well. What behaviors and what skills did that person have? And that's your rubric.
yeah. Yeah. Does that work, Joe?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the framing of it was a slightly different from what I meant, which was a little bit more about, if you've got to review the quality of the output of your sales team, how do you do that against the backdrop of a very fast rate of change in terms of go-to-market messaging, product market fit, all of those other points? Because I think it's quite hard to, pin on what success looks like as you're sort of going through that early stage of journey. For the record, we're past that now, but I'd want to put the right measures in place to be able to analyze that.
Well, I think this comes back to that first slide where we looked at, founder as salesperson, founder as sales leader, and then hiring in a sales team environment. And I think if you don't have your product market fit really defined, it's probably a little premature to think about hiring salespeople. I mean, that would be my recommendation. And, I'd be interested to hear from others, but I think hiring salespeople when you're still figuring out what the product market fit is doing, and I've seen it before, you're going to end up, you either have to hire a salesperson that's going to be a go-to-market partner for you,
Yeah.
and then there's all the distractions that come with that, or you just got to kind of figure it out with the founding team. And then once you have that product market fit, then you can repeat, right? Because the repeatability then can come in.
not all founders are good go-to-market guys. Sometimes the right sales leader initially will help consolidate the go-to-market and
100%.
consolidate the market matching to actually be able to start selling more effectively.
And what's the best way to validate product market fit? It's to be talking to potential customers.
I'd argue in today's world, it's the only validation of product market fit is, and when people pay you repeatedly for your service, right? Revenue's got to be involved these days.
Yeah. Okay, we're definitely over time, but it's a fruitful discussion, right? So I suppose to the point of managing, and maybe for Jeremy as well. So the underlying stuff that's going on is a sales process, as discussed, right? Which is the road. You've got your sales method, right? Which is how you do stuff. So are you driving I don't know which car to pick, a Ford Fiesta, or are you driving a, Maserati, or a Lada? So how you do the stuff, and then sales qualification, which is like your sat nav over the top, right? Which is a combination of process and method. Can be internal, an internal kind of checklist, a med pick, spice, etc. Right? So as you obviously manage, you're either going to be ideally putting them into this system where there is a little bit of a system, but you're going to be evolving the system, right? On, Jeremy, you're the person who wants to develop process. That's obviously a good thing as discussed, but it might be fully baked in, and you don't need that. But this is just to communicate there are three things that underlie B2B sales execution. So focus on these areas and get them defined and working, and these need to bake into kind of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month activities.
Can I just jump in on this? Because there's something I think so important on this slide. Yeah, so many sales processes or salespeople are thinking about how I want to sell.
Yeah.
No, focus on how your buyers want to buy. And that actually gives you a whole range of stuff from how I generate pipeline through to commercials, through to legal, etc.
Yeah. Sorry, I was diving in because the sales process is designed to support the buying process, right?
Absolutely.
So that's
it should be. It often
works.
isn't.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. So unless there's any other questions, thank you for your time. If you'd like to continue the discussion, you can find the calendar link in the chat. Come to the next one that we're doing in Jan. There's a sales readiness score, so you can see the gaps in terms of B2B sales execution on the site, or we can chat about 5 days to scale. But yeah, are there any other questions at all? Okay. All right, brilliant. Thank you for joining.
Can I just leave people with, click on the link. Don't be afraid. We're not going to try to sell you anything. We absolutely love this topic. We love talking to founders about how they ready their go-to-market, how they modify, change their go-to-market. We love nothing more than spend 30 minutes with you between now and the end of the year. It's going to be a slow time anyway. So, click on the link, book an appointment. Let's get together. It'd be great to talk to you guys one-to-one.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys.
Have a great Christmas.
Thank you.
Or holiday.
See ya. Cheers.